I'm Claire Morrison. I'm 29 years old. I run a small marketing studio in Portland, Oregon. And last Tuesday, I opened an email from my father's employer that made me drop my coffee mug on the kitchen floor and watch it shatter into pieces I still haven't swept up. Some debts don't come due until the person holding them decides you can't run anymore. Some debts aren't measured in dollars at all. They're measured in years of silence, in the weight of a receipt saved in a safe deposit box for over a decade, waiting for exactly the right moment to prove you were never family. You were an investment they wanted back. That email didn't come from my father. It came from his employer's human resources department. A routine audit had flagged an anomalous wire transfer made 6 weeks earlier. $53,000 sent from his corporate account to a personal bank account under my name. A transfer I never authorized, never requested, and until that moment never knew existed. My father had listed me as the intended recipient, but the money wasn't for me. It was a repayment. A reimbursement he had demanded in front of 40 people at my college graduation dinner with a handwritten receipt he pulled from his jacket pocket. The same receipt I had spent 11 years pretending I never saw. The central question that drives every family secret is always the same. How long can silence hold before it breaks into something that can't be ignored? For me, that answer arrived in a 2-sentence email from a stranger in payroll. That graduation dinner was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. 40 people crowded into a private room at a steakhouse outside Portland. My mother had decorated the table with photos from every stage of my education. My grandmother sat at the end with tears in her eyes. My father had ordered the most expensive bottle of champagne on the menu. He stood up before the main course arrived, tapped his glass with a fork, and smiled the same smile he always used when he was about to do something I wouldn't see coming. He talked about how proud he was, how hard I had worked, how college had shaped me into the woman sitting before him. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, legal paper, the kind you use for contracts. He unfolded it slowly and held it up so everyone could see. It was a handwritten receipt dated 11 years earlier. $53,000, the exact cost of my undergraduate degree, listed line by line. Tuition, fees, room and board, textbooks. At the bottom, in my handwriting from when I was 18 years old, a single sentence. I understand this is a loan and I will repay it in full. He had me sign it the week before freshman orientation. He told me it was just a formality, something to teach me financial responsibility. He never mentioned it again for 11 years, not once. I remember the room going quiet. My mother stared at her plate. My grandmother looked confused. My father's brother started laughing nervously, thinking it was a joke, but my father wasn't laughing. He said this was a teaching moment. He said too many young people expected everything for free. He said I should be grateful he hadn't charged interest earlier, but since I had a degree now, I could start making good on my word. He named a number, $74,000. Original principal plus interest at 6.5% compounded annually. He wanted it paid within 12 months. I sat there with my hands in my lap and felt something break cleanly in half inside my chest. Not anger at first, just a strange, hollow clarity. Every card, every gift, every conversation about how proud he was had apparently been a ledger entry. I had been keeping count wrong my entire life. I thought the loan was forgotten. He had been waiting for the moment it would hurt most to collect. I paid him. That's the part that still makes me feel sick when I think about it. I sold my car. I drained the savings account I had built during freelance work in college. I took on credit card debt I am still paying off today. I sent him check after check until I had covered the principal he claimed I owed, $53,000. And I told him the interest was a price I would never pay because I was done. No more loans, no more contact beyond what was absolutely necessary. He cashed every single check without a word. 2 years passed. I rebuilt my life. I started my marketing studio. I met good people. I stopped checking my bank account every morning with dread. I thought the debt was closed. Then the HR email arrived. The woman who wrote it was named Dana from the payroll compliance division. She said they had discovered an anomaly in their internal audit. A wire transfer of $53,000 had been sent from my father's corporate expense account to a personal bank account bearing my name. The transfer had been processed 6 weeks earlier. 3 days after my father was placed on administrative leave pending an unrelated investigation. The timing, she wrote, was concerning. And the amount matched exactly the figure he had claimed I owed him 11 years ago. I called her immediately. I told her I had no knowledge of the transaction. I told her I had never received $53,000. I told her I had already paid my father every cent he demanded. She went quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that made the room go cold around me. She said the wire transfer did not go to my account. It went to an account opened in my name at a different bank, an account with a signature card that matched my driver's license number. An account that had been closed the same day it was opened. The money was withdrawn in cash within hours. My father had not paid me. He had used company funds to create the appearance of a repayment to me, then taken the money himself. And he had used my identity to do it. The HR department now believed I was either complicit or the victim of identity theft. But the paper trail made me look like the beneficiary. The signature matched. The license number matched. The account was in my name. That was the moment I realized the graduation dinner demand was never about getting repaid. It was about creating a documented history of a debt so that when the audit came, there would be a story that made sense. He needed me to have a motive. He needed the company to believe I was the one who took the money. And he had spent 11 years building the evidence to prove it. Dana from Payroll Compliance gave me the account number and the name of the bank, a regional credit union in a suburb of Portland I had never visited. She also sent me the signature card image. It was my name, my handwriting, but the address was wrong. An apartment complex I had never lived in. A unit number that didn't exist in that building. The driver's license number on the application was mine, but the expiration date had been altered by a single digit. Someone had taken a photocopy of my old license, changed one number with a black pen, and then scanned it back into a digital form. The forger had been sloppy enough to leave the pen mark visible if you knew what to look for. But the bank didn't know what to look for. They had opened the account in under 15 minutes. I asked Dana what my father had told HR about the transfer. She paused. Then she said he had claimed it was a repayment for a loan he had given me 11 years ago to pay for college. He had provided the same handwritten receipt. He had explained that I had recently paid him back in full, and that he was simply returning the money to me as a gift because he felt guilty about demanding repayment in the first place. In his version, I had sent him the $53,000 in monthly installments over 2 years. He had kept the cash in a separate account. Then he decided to give it back through a corporate wire transfer because, he said, he wanted a clean paper trail for tax purposes. The problem was the paper trail contradicted every part of that story. There was no record of me sending him monthly payments. He had cashed my checks, but those deposits went into his personal account, not a segregated holding account. And the wire transfer had been initiated from his corporate account, which was explicitly prohibited for personal transactions. The company's fraud investigator had already flagged the wire as a potential embezzlement. They just didn't know yet that the intended recipient was his own daughter. I hung up with Dana and sat in my office for 3 hours. I pulled up every bank statement I had from the repayment period. I found all the canceled checks. I made a spreadsheet. The total I had sent him was exactly $53,000. Every check had cleared. The dates matched the timeline he had given HR. But he had cashed them, not held them. The cash he supposedly returned to me had never existed. He had simply moved company money into a fake account and then into his own hands, using the story of our loan as cover. The next morning, I drove to the credit union. I brought my passport, my social security card, my utility bills, and a printout of Dana's email. The branch manager was a woman named Patricia who looked like she had already heard about the fraud investigation. She was polite but guarded. I explained that an account had been opened in my name without my knowledge. She pulled up the file and studied the signature card. Then she looked at my driver's license, then back at the card. She asked me to sign my name on a blank piece of paper. I did. She held it next to the card. The slant was slightly different. The loop on the capital C was tighter on the card. She said it could be a normal variation, but she would flag the account for internal review. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. She said the account had been closed the same day it was opened, and the funds were withdrawn by a man matching the description of my father. The teller who handled the transaction had written a note in the system. It read, "Customer claimed to be the account holder's father and presented a signed authorization letter. Authorizing signature matches signature on file." My father had forged a second document, a letter supposedly from me, authorizing him to act on my behalf. He had practiced my signature long enough to fool a bank teller. I asked if I could see the letter. Patricia said she would need to get approval from legal, but she did show me the security footage. There he was, my father, wearing a baseball hat and sunglasses, standing at the teller window with a folded piece of paper in his hand. He handed it over, signed something on a tablet, took an envelope, and walked out. The timestamp was 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday, 3 days after he was placed on administrative leave. I drove home in a fog. I called my mother. She answered on the first ring, which was unusual. I told her what I had found. She was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said she needed to tell me something. She said my father had been acting strangely for months. He had withdrawn a large portion of their joint retirement savings. He had told her it was for a business opportunity. She had found a receipt from a storage unit he had rented 3 weeks before the wire transfer. She said she was afraid to confront him. She said she had been sleeping in the guest room. I drove to the storage unit the next day. It was in a strip mall 30 minutes from their house. I used the address from the receipt and found the unit number. The lock was a combination padlock, but the code was written on the rental agreement my mother had photographed. I opened it. Inside, there were 5 boxes. The first box held copies of every check I had ever written to him, arranged in chronological order. The second box held a binder with detailed notes on my income, my expenses, my estimated net worth, updated quarterly. The third box held a folder labeled graduation dinner. Inside, there were printed photographs of every guest, notes on which ones had seemed sympathetic to me, and a typed script of what he had planned to say. He had rehearsed it. The fourth box held something that froze me. A single manila envelope with the words "Identity Kit Claire" on the tab. Inside, there was a photocopy of my driver's license, a sample of my signature traced onto blank paper, and a handwritten list of bank names with notes like, "Requires 2 forms of ID and opens account online only." The fifth box was empty except for a single piece of paper, a letter addressed to me. It started with the words, "By the time you read this, I will already have done what needed to be done." I read the rest standing in the cold storage unit with the door half open. He wrote that he had been planning this for over a decade, that the loan was never about the money, that it was about control. He wrote that he had watched me build a life independent of him and that he could not allow that to stand. He wrote that the fraud would either destroy me or force me to come back to him for help. Either outcome, he wrote, was acceptable. He signed it with his full name and a smiley face. I took a picture of the letter. I took pictures of the entire storage unit. Then I closed the door and drove to the Portland Police Department. I walked into the fraud division and asked to speak to a detective. I showed them the letter, the bank records, the credit union footage, the binder of surveillance of my finances. The detective looked through everything for 45 minutes. Then he asked me a question I had not prepared for. He asked if my father had ever done this to anyone else before. He asked if there were other victims, other family members, other loans, other forged documents. I said I did not know. He said he would run a name check. 2 days later, my phone rang at 6:00 a.m. It was the detective. He told me they had found a similar pattern involving my father and an elderly uncle who had passed away 5 years ago. The uncle had loaned my father $80,000 for a business that never existed. The uncle died before the loan was repaid. The estate had never pursued it. But the documentation the detective had pulled from civil court records showed the same handwriting, the same type of handwritten receipt, the same promise to repay with interest that was never kept. I realized then that I was not the first person my father had tried to destroy with paper. I was just the first one who had lived to fight back. The detective said they were opening a formal investigation. He said they would need me to stay available. He said I might need to testify. I said I would. He said I should also expect my father to escalate. He had built this plan over 11 years. He was not going to surrender quietly. I went home and checked my mail. There was a certified letter from my father's attorney. It was a demand letter for the unpaid interest on the original loan. He claimed I still owed him $21,000 in interest because the principal repayment only covered the base amount. He had attached a new calculation table. 6.5% compounded annually for 11 years on $53,000. Minus my payments, which he claimed were all applied to principal by his choosing, not by agreement. The letter said if I did not pay within 30 days, he would file a civil lawsuit and attach my income, my house, my business accounts. He had signed the letter himself. Below his signature, a handwritten note, "You thought this was over. It's just getting started." The civil suit deadline passed. He filed 23 days later. The court papers were served to my office address, not my home. He wanted my clients to see the process server walk through the door. He wanted the receptionist to hand me the envelope in front of other people. The complaint was detailed, professional, and almost entirely fictional. He claimed I had agreed to a repayment plan with compound interest calculated annually. He claimed I had defaulted after the first 2 years. He claimed I owed him $21,342.17, plus legal fees, plus court costs, plus interest accruing daily from the date of filing. He attached a spreadsheet that showed payments I had never made and dates that did not match any transaction in my records. My attorney was a woman named Rachel who specialized in family financial litigation. She read the complaint and told me this was not really about the money. She said he was using the legal system to force discovery. He wanted access to my bank records, my business accounts, my client contracts, my tax returns. He wanted to see everything. And the only way to stop him was to prove he had already been paid in full and that his claim was fraudulent. The burden of proof was on me. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering every piece of financial documentation I had produced since I was 18 years old. Bank statements, canceled checks, Venmo records, tax filings, payment confirmations. I organized them into a binder that weighed nearly 8 pounds. My attorney cross-referenced every payment against his claimed balance. When she finished, she found something I had missed. The total I had paid him was $53,000 exactly, but according to his own original receipt, the loan was due in full upon graduation. There was no mention of an installment plan in the original document. He had never specified a repayment schedule. He had simply demanded payment, and I had paid. My attorney argued that meant the debt was fully satisfied the moment my last check cleared. The interest claim had no contractual basis. The judge set a hearing date for 6 weeks out. During those 6 weeks, my father filed 3 more motions. One to subpoena my business partnership agreement. One to compel me to produce my personal diary from college. One to request a psychological evaluation on the grounds that I was exhibiting signs of parental alienation syndrome. The judge denied all 3, but the damage was done. The court filings were public record. A local news blog picked up the story. The headline read, "Daughter sues father over college loan dispute." They added context about the wire transfer investigation. They included quotes from anonymous sources at my father's former employer. I started losing clients. 2 contracts were terminated within a week. A third was put on hold pending the outcome of the litigation. The implied message was clear. No one wanted to be associated with a fraud investigation in progress. My reputation, which I had spent 6 years building, was now collateral damage in a case I had not started. Then the other shoe dropped. My mother called me on a Tuesday night. Her voice was different, flat like she had been crying for hours. She said my father had been arrested, not for the wire transfer, for something else. The elderly uncle's estate, the $80,000 loan. The family had reopened the investigation after the news coverage. They had found a copy of the loan document in the uncle's safety deposit box. The signature was forged. The notary stamp was from a notary who had retired 2 years before the date on the document. The estate attorney had filed a criminal complaint. My father was being charged with felony forgery and financial exploitation of an elderly person. I felt relief before I felt anything else. Then guilt. Then a strange, hollow exhaustion. He was in jail. The man who had spent 11 years building a paper fortress to trap me had finally been caught by a crime I did not even know about. I visited him at the county detention center. I do not know why, Some part of me needed to see the face behind the plan. He looked older than his mugshot, smaller. The detention center orange made his skin look gray. He sat down across from me and picked up the phone on his side of the glass. I said I came to tell him that I had found the storage unit, that I had the letter, that his forgery of my signature was on file at the credit union, that his demand letter was now evidence in a criminal investigation, that I had nothing left to hide from. He looked at me for a long time. Then he smiled. Not a sad smile, not a defeated smile, the same smile from the graduation dinner. He said, "I know, I wanted you to find all of it." He told me the entire plan, calmly, like he was describing a business strategy. The loan was never about the money. It was about creating a paper trail that would survive any outcome. If he went to prison, the debt would still exist. The interest would still accrue. He had structured it so that even a bankruptcy filing would not fully discharge it. He had set up a civil judgment that could follow me for 20 years. He had filed a lien against my business. He had made sure that even if he was convicted, even if he lost everything, I would never be free of him. I asked him why. He said because I had left, because I had built a life that did not include him, because I had looked at everything he had given me and decided it was not enough. He said that was the debt I could never repay, the debt of expectation, the debt of attention, the debt of gratitude, and he would spend the rest of his life collecting it in whatever form he could. I stood up. I put the phone back on the cradle. I walked out of the detention center and into the parking lot, and I did not look back. But I felt the weight of what he had said settle into my bones. A civil judgment, a lien, a debt that could survive prison, bankruptcy, even death. He had built a machine that would keep running after he stopped tending it. I called my attorney from the car. She told me not to panic. She said the forgery conviction would make it easier to vacate the lien. She said the civil suit would likely be dismissed once the criminal case established his pattern of fraud. She said I had the truth on my side, but she also said something I have not been able to forget. She said, "Claire, even when you win this, you will not win it the way you want to. There is no clean resolution. There is no victory lap. There is only the end of the fight and the beginning of the recovery." She was right. The criminal trial lasted 8 months. My father was convicted on 2 counts of forgery and 1 count of financial exploitation. He was sentenced to 4 years in state prison. The judge also ordered restitution to the uncle's estate, but the civil lawsuit took another 14 months. My father fought it from prison, filing motions by mail, representing himself because he had no money left for attorneys. He argued that the original loan was valid, that my payments did not cover the full amount, that the interest was contractually owed. He lost. The judge ruled that the loan was fully satisfied and that my father's claim was without merit. The lien was removed. The judgment was dismissed. The legal record showed I owed nothing. But the paper trail he built did not disappear. The news articles are still online. The court filings are still public. Every time a potential client searches my name, they see the headline about the college loan dispute. Some of them never call back. Some of them ask questions I cannot answer without sounding defensive. Some of them simply choose another designer. I have learned that some debts are not measured in dollars. They are measured in the energy it takes to keep explaining yourself to people who were not there. My father understood that better than I did. He knew that even if I won every legal battle, I would still be fighting the court of public opinion for years. I still get letters from him sometimes. They are forwarded from the prison address in a plain envelope. I have not opened a single one. I keep them in a box in my garage. 23 letters so far. I do not know what they say. I do not want to know. But I have not thrown them away either. Some part of me is still afraid that if I stop collecting them, he will find another way to reach me. That is the truest measure of what he did. Not the $53,000. Not the forged signature. The fear that even after everything, after prison, after the court rulings, after the years of silence, I am still waiting for the next ambush. And the machine he built is still running. The paperwork still exists in scattered databases. The credit union still has the signature card. The investigator on his former employer's case is still trying to trace the wire funds. The civil judgment may be dismissed, but the lien was active long enough to damage my business credit score. The vestigial effects of his plan are now embedded in systems that do not care about context. They only see the data. and the data says there was a dispute. The data says a judgment was filed, even if it was later dismissed. The data does not tell the whole story, it just remembers. That is the part of his legacy I am still dismantling, piece by piece, report by report, one credit bureau dispute at a time. I do not know when I will be done. I do not know if I will ever be done. But I know one thing clearly now that I did not understand before. The opposite of debt is not payment. The opposite of debt is freedom. And freedom does not come from a court order. It comes from the moment you stop treating their paperwork as if it carries the weight of truth. The civil judgment was dismissed on a Tuesday in March. I sat in the back of the courtroom while the judge read the ruling. My father's name was called. There was no response. He was still in prison. His court-appointed representative said nothing. The gavel hit the wood and it was over. I walked out of the courthouse into a gray Oregon afternoon and waited for the feeling of victory to arrive. It never did. What arrived instead was the quiet realization that the thing I had been fighting had already ended months earlier. The lawsuit was just the echo. The employer's investigation concluded the same week. Dana from Payroll Compliance called to tell me that the company had determined I was not complicit in the wire transfer. They had found the forged authorization letter, the closed account, the cash withdrawal. They had also discovered that my father had used the same method to divert 2 smaller amounts from department budgets over the previous year. The total embezzled across all incidents was just over $78,000. The company filed its own criminal referral. They also sent me a formal letter of apology and offered to compensate me for the legal fees I had incurred defending against their initial suspicion. I accepted. But the credit damage lingered. The lien had been active for 11 months. During that time, 2 credit card companies had closed my accounts. My business line of credit had been frozen. A vendor I had worked with for 3 years changed their payment terms from net 30 to cash on delivery. The lien removal was processed within a week of the judgment dismissal, but the credit reporting agencies took months to update their records. I filed disputes, sent certified copies of the court order, made phone calls that lasted over an hour each. One agency asked me to provide a notarized statement explaining why the lien was invalid. I sent them the judge's ruling. They asked again. I sent it again. This cycle repeated 4 times before the entry was finally removed. During that year, I learned the language of financial recovery. I learned that a dispute letter must reference specific section numbers. I learned that certified mail with return receipt was the only way to ensure they read it. I learned that credit reporting is not a system for truth. It is a system for data entry, and data entry errors can take longer to fix than the original damage took to inflict. My mother and I started talking again, slowly, carefully. She had filed for divorce 3 months after my father's arrest. She told me she had known about the loan, but not the forgery. She told me she had suspected something was wrong when he started working late and hiding bank statements, but she had convinced herself it was stress. She said she was ashamed that she had not protected me. I told her I was not holding her responsible, but I also told her I needed time before we could rebuild trust. She said she understood. We met for coffee once a month. It was awkward for the first 6 months. Then it became less awkward. Then it became bearable. Then one day, we laughed about something stupid, and I realized she was not the same person who had sat silently at that graduation dinner. I also started therapy, not the kind where you talk about your childhood, the kind where you talk about the specific way your body reacts when you see a certified letter in the mail, the kind where you learn that hypervigilance has a physical cost. My therapist told me that trauma from financial abuse is often overlooked because the bruises are not visible, but the nervous system does not distinguish between a physical threat and a financial one. The same cortisol spikes, the same sleep disruption, the same fight or flight response every time an unexpected email arrives. She gave me tools to recognize the pattern and interrupt it, closing my eyes and numbing 3 objects in the room, checking my bank account only on scheduled days, setting my phone to do not disturb during certain hours, small boundaries that felt ridiculous at first and essential later. Then the letters started coming. The first one arrived 3 weeks after the sentencing, postmarked from the state correctional facility. My name and address in handwriting I recognized from 1,000 checks I had written as a teenager. I did not open it. I put it in a drawer. The second one came 2 weeks later. Same handwriting, same drawer. By the time I had collected 23 letters, the drawer would not close properly. I told my therapist about them. She asked what I was afraid would happen if I opened one. I said I was afraid he would find a way to reach through the paper and continue the argument. She said that was a reasonable fear. She also said that keeping the letters unopened meant he was still controlling what I did with my attention. I opened the first one on a Sunday morning. My husband sat next to me on the couch with his hand on my back. The envelope was sealed with clear tape. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. The handwriting was smaller than I remembered, tighter. He wrote that he was taking a class in the prison, that he had been diagnosed with a condition he would not name, that he was sorry for the way things had ended. He did not say he was sorry for what he had done. He said he was sorry that it had to go that far. That was the distinction I had been waiting for. He still believed the loan was legitimate. He still believed the interest was owed. He still believed I owed him something. He just regretted that the legal system did not agree. I read the rest of the letters that afternoon. They were all variations on the same theme. Some were angry, some were sad. Some were filled with Bible verses and promises of redemption. One included a detailed financial analysis proving, according to his calculations, that I still owed him $11,000 after accounting for inflation. He had attached a chart. In every letter at the bottom, he had drawn a small smiley face, the same one from the storage unit note. I did not respond. I put the letters back in the drawer for another week. Then I took them outside and burned them in my backyard fire pit. I watched the paper turn black and curl into ash. I did not feel triumphant. I felt lighter. Not because he was gone, but because I had finally stopped treating his words as if they had power over me. The fire consumed 23 arguments, 23 demands, 23 attempts to keep a connection alive that I had already buried. I poured water on the ash, stirred it with a stick, and went inside. The final surprising detail came 6 months later. I received a letter from the estate attorney handling my uncle's affairs. He wrote that the restitution payment from my father had been processed. The full $80,000 had been repaid from the sale of assets seized during the criminal case. The estate had been closed, but there was a remainder, a small amount left over after all legal fees and distributions. The attorney said the uncle had left a handwritten note in his will, addressed to me. It had been misfiled and only recently discovered. The note was dated 2 weeks before his death. It said, "To Claire, if you ever need proof that he was not telling the truth, I have a copy of the real loan. He forged it. I knew. I was too sick to fight him. I hope you are stronger than I was." The attorney attached a photocopy of the original note and a check for $4,200, the remainder from the estate. I held the check in my hands and thought about timing. My uncle had known the truth. He had known before the graduation dinner, before the forged bank account, before the arrest. He had known, and he had not told anyone because he was not strong enough to fight. But he had left a trail, a message in a will, a single piece of paper that would not surface until after everything was already decided. My father had spent 11 years building a paper fortress. My uncle had spent his last weeks hiding a single key. The key did not unlock the fortress. It just proved there was a fortress in the first place. I framed the note. It hangs in my office above my desk, not as a trophy, as a reminder that truth has its own timeline. It does not always arrive when you need it. It does not always come in the form you expect. But buried documents, misfiled letters, forgotten witnesses, they have a way of surfacing eventually. The human instinct to leave a record is stronger than any attempt to suppress it. I still check my mailbox with a certain tension. I still have moments when a call from an unknown number makes my chest tighten. I still run periodic credit reports. I have accepted that part of me will always be watchful, but I have also accepted that watchfulness is not the same as fear. It is just the residue of surviving something designed to break you. And surviving, I have learned, is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of learning what you are actually capable of. The graduation dinner happened 11 years ago. The wire transfer investigation happened 3 years ago. My father has been in prison for 2 years now. He is eligible for parole in 18 months. My attorney has already told me he may try to contact me again. He may try to restart the civil case. He may find another angle. The machine he built may still have some moving parts. But I am not the same person who sat in that steakhouse watching him unfold a piece of paper. I have a stack of court rulings, a framed note from a dead uncle, a credit score I rebuilt from scratch, and a fire pit full of ash. I no longer owe anyone an explanation for the life I chose. I no longer treat his paperwork as if it carries authority. I look at it now the way you look at a receipt for something you returned a long time ago. It has no power over me because I have already walked out of the store. I have thought a lot about what my father taught me, not the lessons he claimed to be teaching, the ones he taught without meaning to. He taught me that debt is not always a number on a page. Sometimes it is a story someone tells you about who you owe and why. He taught me that paperwork can be weaponized, that love can be conditional, that family can be the people who hold the receipt until you are old enough to pay. But he also taught me something he never intended. He taught me that the story is not over just because someone has written it down. Every piece of paper he created was designed to outlast the truth. The loan receipt, the forged signature, the fake bank account, the lien, the civil suit. They were all attempts to freeze time, to trap me in a version of events I never agreed to. But paper burns. Records get misfiled. Credit reports get corrected. And the truth, if you hold it long enough, will eventually surface through the cracks he left behind. My uncle's note proved that. The court ruling proved that. The fire pit proved that. The opposite of debt is not payment. The opposite of debt is freedom. And freedom is not something a judge can grant you. It is something you have to recognize in yourself. I still get nervous when I see a certified letter in the mail. I still scan bank statements more carefully than most people. I still check the locks twice before bed. The hypervigilance does not fully disappear, but it has transformed into something else. A kind of earned awareness. I know now what people are capable of hiding in plain sight. I know how easy it is to build a tower of documents that looks like truth. And I know that no matter how tall that tower gets, it can be dismantled one page at a time. I tell this story not because it is unique. I tell it because it is not. Financial abuse in families is more common than most of us want to admit. It hides behind words like obligation and gratitude and investment. It wears the face of a parent who says they only want what is best for you. But the test is simple. If the love comes with a ledger, it was never love. It was a transaction waiting to be collected. If this story found you at the right moment, if it made you pause and think about a receipt someone is holding in your name, I want you to know that you are allowed to close that account. You are allowed to walk out of the store. The debt does not own you. The story does not define you. And the person holding the paper does not get to decide when the book is closed. Thank you for listening. If you want more stories about the hidden costs of family, the debts we never signed, and the strength it takes to walk away, please subscribe. I will be here next week with another story that might change the way you see the world. And if you know someone who needs to hear that they are allowed to walk away, send this to them. Sometimes the only thing we need is permission to stop paying.